Being able to cope with life in general can already be a serious struggle for women who suffer from PMDD. If we happen to be in a high-pressured, high-stress role, it can feel 100 times worse, specifically during our bad weeks. So when it comes to the working world, where does that actually leave us?
See the new girl vibe, she in her stride. She goes side to side, she goes tap, 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 tap.
Hey guys, it's your girl Miss Annie J, and today I wanted to focus on PMDD and the working life. As we know, the symptoms can include things like difficulty concentrating, severe fatigue, depression, sadness, hopelessness, suicidal thoughts, a loss of interest in the things we typically enjoy, and the list goes on. So how does a condition like this tie into work life? I want to cover two items. One is the article. The intent for the article is to raise awareness around PMDD and the employment life. And then the second is a study by my favorite group, the National Institutes of Health. I just wanted to maybe bring our attention to what may be considered as taboo talk, because actually this is a reality for a lot of women who deal with the condition, and has been even for myself. So first up, I will cover the research study that was published by the National Institutes of Health this year. And the title of the study is The Impact of Premenstrual Disorders on Work Disruptions Among Working Women. As always, if you want to check out the study yourself, I will pop the link in the description box below, because I'm not going to go through the entire thing. It is quite a long excerpt, but I just wanted to touch on the fundamental points. So with regards to the background for the study, they have stated that physical and emotional manifestations of premenstrual disorder cause increased absenteeism, decreased productivity, and decreased work-related quality of life. It's a study that took place in Iran, and the purpose of it was to investigate the relationship between premenstrual disorders and work performance in working women. So there were 358 participants. 121 of those participants had premenstrual disorders, and the prevalence of premenstrual disorders was significantly higher in teachers than workers. So I'm going to relate this to people who do office work. That can be quite demanding mentally in comparison, for example, to somebody who is a driver for a living. So that's my assumption in regards to them specifying teachers from workers. So they state that the teachers had a worse work performance than the workers, which could be due to higher education levels, work stress, more complex tasks, and an increase in work responsibility in comparison to workers. So there were significant differences between the two groups when it came to work productivity and functional work capacity. And then to investigate the effect of the severity of the premenstrual symptoms on the work outcomes, they separated the participants into 3 categories: those who deal with PMDD, those who deal with PMS, and those who don't suffer from any of those. And they observed that women with PMDD suffered the worst negative impact on their functional work capacity, which for us is not going to be a surprise. If you have PMDD, this is the story of our lives. The difference of the impact of PMDD on the women who were teachers and those who were workers, for me it makes sense, because when we are going through the condition, we are well versed in knowing that life becomes a struggle. The more stress or difficulties that are added into our lives at the time when we are experiencing the symptoms at their worst, the more difficult the symptoms are to handle. In fact, the symptoms actually feel 100 times worse than they would if we are not also then dealing with external stressful factors. The results of this study isn't a shock to me, because we are already up against it mentally. So anything that adds to that will just intensify the level of difficulty that we experienced at that time. So to put this all into perspective, I want to just cover some first-hand examples that have been put into an article by a lady called Lydia Morrish of women who were going through or experienced PMDD during their working life and how that impacted them. And perhaps if you're someone who deals with the condition, you will be able to relate to some of the things that these women say. The point of the article is to raise awareness for workplaces in regards to how to better support employees who deal with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So the article starts off with an example of a lady called Lucy Henry, and it states that she returned to work at her supermarket job after trying to take her own life. She didn't expect to be punished by her boss. I mean, when I read that, I was like, that's insane, firstly. I was called in for a disciplinary for my absence. And in that disciplinary, I said I'd attempted suicide. My employers adjourned it halfway through to discuss. And when I returned, they continued to give me a written warning about the absence. Guys, this example to me was mind-blowing, okay? Because there is a clear lack of empathy for Lucy. And Lucy is one of many. I'm sure that there will be tons of women who have a similar experience to what this lady went through. The author then goes on to say that many women suffering with PMDD find it grueling to hold down jobs, let alone pursue a career. Of the 12 women with PMDD that I spoke to, all had at some point adjusted their work life and their dreams to suit the disorder. Am I preaching to the choir? Murphy ended up working temporary jobs that afforded her a level of flexibility to work around the PMDD. I didn't want to be trapped, owned, and constantly in disciplinaries, she says. You do the job and you go, which was perfect for me, she also stated. Lucy's dream is to work in art. I'm creative, but when I've got my PMDD, picking up a paintbrush is the last thing I want to do. Your motor skills reduce, and I find less patience and less ability. I can also relate with what she stated. To cope, many women mask their symptoms at work. One woman said it's like Mary Poppins on crack. You go to work and put on a mask, but inside are crippled with depression, anxiety, maybe thoughts of suicide, but you can't release that in the workplace. And this is another interesting point. Suppressing symptoms can have long-term effects on health and well-being, says Knox. It's a negative coping mechanism. Suppression is dangerous. I think all of us who deal with the condition can probably relate to one or more of these examples that these women have been through. Holding down a steady job when you are dealing with the severe effects of the condition is excessively challenging. And that desire to enter a work state of temporary roles makes sense. I've actually touched on this in my PMDD and work life blog post. And if you haven't read that, I am going to pop that in the description box below. So definitely check that out after. Everyone's different. And I know in my experience, I cannot necessarily speak on behalf of all women who deal with PMDD, but I have certainly been one of those women who covered my suffering with a smile. It's almost like you don't want to come across as being incompetent, but the condition can make you feel when you're going through it as if you are incompetent, when actually it's not that you're not incompetent. It's just that's your state of mind at the time, which actually has no bearing on your true ability. Because if you couldn't do the job, you wouldn't be in the job in the first place, right? When you're going through the symptoms of the condition, it creates this mental illusion because of the emotional hardship, the depression, the sadness, the anxiety, the fatigue, change in appetite, the body dysmorphia. Like, those things will cause you to feel like, actually, I cannot do this, when in fact you can. My personal experience has been to just power through, because this is not a true representative of the person I actually am. And so I will power through and do what is necessary within my role, because I just refuse to accept that this is who I actually am during those bad weeks. Now, that hasn't always been easy to apply. And for a long time, before I was formally diagnosed with the condition, I just thought something was seriously wrong with me. I thought maybe I was bipolar, which I'm sure other women have experienced. Some women get misdiagnosed, but obviously it wasn't that. It was this condition. But now that I have gotten to a much better place in terms of my well-being, dealing with the condition, managing the symptoms, my work life certainly improved. And there's something that I stopped doing. I stopped hiding the condition. So anywhere I work, I will state, when they ask, do you have a disability or what have you, I will state that I do have this condition, because I feel like it is good for them to know. But also, and obviously not everyone's going to be like this, because I know that I'm a bit of a, PMDD ambassador as such. I like my workplaces to know, so that when they're doing well-being webinars and well-being topics of discussion, I can get involved in that and raise awareness around the condition within the workplace that I'm at, which I have done in the past. But it's not purely for that reason that I tell them. I believe it's good to let them know, so that if you do ever need support in your role and what you're doing because of the symptoms that you're experiencing, that your workplace would be able to then support you. And if they are a responsible employer, a supportive employer, which I believe, at least in the UK, that many employers are, then you will receive that adequate level of support, I would hope. So I understand the notion of taking on temp roles, working for yourself. I mean, what I do with my social media, that's a form of business in a way, my own personal venture. Yes, my dream would be that I can work for myself full time, but that isn't viable at this stage in my life. So whilst it's not, my priority is to keep up my disciplines with PMDD that I have spoken about many times. I put these things into place on a regular basis to help me manage the symptoms of the condition, so that I can continue to live my life as I would like to, and not have my life dictated by the condition on a constant basis, which used to be my experience. Us ladies with this condition do have to tailor our lives in some way, especially depending on how severely we experience the symptoms. Perhaps you are currently in a full-time 9 to 5 and you're struggling. Then it may be a good idea to look at alternative options like temporary positions, so that you're not stuck in one place. You have that flexibility to work around the symptoms that you experience. Pursuing a career when you've got PMDD is quite a challenge, I believe. I definitely feel that it is possible, but I also believe that for a lot of women, the idea of it is not as appealing as it would be for women who don't suffer from any premenstrual disorders. You have to find what works for you. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for other women with PMDD. If you are struggling with the symptoms month in, month out, it is time to tailor your life to make things easier for yourself. It doesn't mean that you are less than, incapable, incompetent. It does not mean any of those things. It is simply a method and a way of looking after your well-being. And your well-being should always be your priority, because your life is more important than any employment. If you've got a way of getting through your work life, things that you do that help you to cope, to manage the condition, to be able to effectively carry out your role even when you are experiencing the condition, or perhaps you're somebody who can identify with some of the examples I read that these women have experienced in their work life, please share your thoughts, because there will be other women who will come across this video and may be encouraged by something that you say. We are a community, a small community, so we have to keep on encouraging and supporting each other. And something that you may be doing, or the way that you may approach this specific topic or area of life, may encourage another lady. Don't forget to check out my blog posts on PMDD, because I do have quite a few, and I have written these predominantly to encourage women who deal with the condition, but also at the same time to raise more awareness around the condition. Continue to fight the fight for your well-being and never give up on yourself.
It's a bright new day. You're here with your girl, Miss Annie J. I'm gonna give them what they want, cause I came to slay. And nothing's ever gonna take my joy away. I'm about that life.